This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
I'm picturing you listening to this in your kitchen. The kettle boiling, the cat or the dog in its basket, all sorts of thoughts running through your head, the plans you're making for the coming week. The one thing you won't be wondering is where you're going to sleep tonight. A couple of months ago, I came across a staggering statistic. 1 person in every 200 in England and Wales is homeless, either sleeping rough or living in temporary accommodation. In London, the proportion is even higher, 1 in 53. In Kensington and Chelsea alone, more than 5,000 people are considered to be homeless. You'll maybe need to listen again on BBC Sounds to take in the enormity of those numbers. The economic geographer Danny Dorling has said, "You could argue that the census form should start to ask, have you ever been homeless, and if so, when, and for how long?" If we classified homelessness as an illness, because it's like an illness in terms of the devastation it causes in the lives of those who suffer from it, if we classified homelessness as an illness, there would be a public outcry. It would be the lead story on the news. Headlines every day. Still no cure for catastrophic disease. I remember when the AIDS epidemic hit back in the 1980s. Posters everywhere. Don't die of ignorance. There was no escaping its existence. The search for a cure became all-consuming in pharmaceutical circles. If homelessness was an illness, we'd be demanding a cure. We'd be holding politicians' feet to the fire on a daily basis. We'd be outraged that this was happening here, now. In Scotland, we compile our statistics differently, but they're no less horrifying. Last year, nearly 30,000 Scottish households were classified as homeless. That translates to 80 households losing their homes every single day. Those families contained more than 14,000 children. That's an average of 38 children losing their home every single day, with all that means for loss of life chances. Imagine a disease that caused serious chronic damage to a whole primary school class every single day. How could we bear that? How could we live with ourselves if we did nothing to contribute to a cure? But still, the catalogue of waste goes on. Just after Easter, a homeless man was found dead on the pavement outside Glasgow Central Station in the middle of the morning. Almost 500 homeless people died on the streets or in homeless accommodation last year. On any given night, nearly 5,000 people are sleeping rough somewhere in England. It's estimated that people sleeping rough have a life expectancy that's 30 years less than the rest of us. If I'd been sleeping on the streets for the last 10 years, statistically, I should be dead by now. For most people, it's a problem that's easy to ignore. It's easy to dismiss people living on the pavements begging or busking badly. They're not like us. They're addicts or alcoholics. They're the ones that have failed, not us. And that judgment lets us off the hook. That excuses us from looking beyond the obvious. And that's where we fail, because the rough sleepers we pass on our way to work or to the pub or to the theatre are only the visible tip of the iceberg. Because homelessness goes far beyond people living on the street. You can be homeless with a roof over your head, but if it's not a safe and secure and appropriate roof, then you're suffering from the same disease. You can be defined as homeless if you're sleeping on the streets, if you're sofa surfing with friends or family, if you're staying in a hostel or a refuge or a bed and breakfast hotel, if you're living in overcrowded conditions, if you're living in fear of violence in your home, if you're living in the sort of appalling conditions that have a profound impact on your health, or if you're sick and disabled and your home isn't suitable for you. My working life involves the exercise of imagination. Every day I sit down at the keyboard and I think myself into other people's shoes. So I set myself the challenge of thinking what it would be like to fall into one of those groups. I say challenge because I've never stood on the cliff edge of not knowing where I was going to sleep that night. I've been lucky. I was a hard-up student, a poor trainee journalist, a broke baby writer, coppering up every month to pay the bills. But my life was never so precarious that I had nowhere to lay my head. So I went for a walk round the city where I live and tried to imagine what it would look like through the eyes of someone who had nothing and nowhere. You see the city in a very different way. Where can I sit down? Where can I go to keep warm? Where can I pee? How can I get new glasses? Where can I go when it's raining? Where can I wash? Who will talk to me? How long can I sit in McDonald's with the cheapest burger? How can I stop hurting? Will I ever see my kids again? Are that bunch of drunks going to beat me up or sexually assault me? And will someone steal my stuff if I go to sleep? A couple of hours of that, and I felt exhausted and drained. And unlike the people living on the streets, I knew I could make it stop any time I wanted to. Those anxiety levels don't only afflict people sleeping rough. We've got a whole new stratum of society these days that we've had to invent a name for, the precariat. People living right on the financial edge. People we can't just loftily dismiss as feckless. I'm talking about people who go to work every day, sometimes doing 2 or even 3 jobs to support their families. They're forced to rely on food banks to put dinner on the table. They're just 1 pay packet or 1 car repair away from financial disaster. The rent arrears mount, the eviction order is granted, the family splits under the stresses. Mum and the kids are in the sort of bed and breakfast nobody would stay in from choice, and Dad's living in his car till the tax and the MOT run out. That's what life is like for around 1/6 of the UK population. 1/6 of our people whose life chances are constricted and constrained. 1/6 of our people who are pushed to the margins. They don't feel part of anything. They're outsiders. They're homeless in the metaphorical sense, if not always in the literal. How do we fix it? Well, we need to hold the politicians to account. Taking the long view and having a housing minister in post for more than a few months would be a start. Because however Brexit turns out, this is still going to be a major social problem that isn't going to disappear by magic. The UK is in breach of its own United Nations human rights commitment to provide people with adequate homes. Under that agreement, everyone has a fundamental human right to housing, which ensures access to a safe, secure, habitable and affordable home with freedom from forced eviction. It is the government's obligation to guarantee that everyone can exercise this right to live in security, peace and dignity. It's not that there's a shortage of roofs to go over people's heads. In March, official figures revealed there were more than 200,000 homes standing empty in England. In Scotland, the figure has almost halved to around 15,000 after local authorities started using a new power to charge owners double council tax on empty homes. So we can be ingenious. We can start to make a difference. We need to remind our government that we can choose to be better. We are the 5th richest economy in the world. Surely we can work out how to give people their human right to housing, how to use the resources we have to put decent roofs over people's heads. From the micro to the macro, we really can choose to be better. We can find the optimism and we can infect our politicians with it. We can make them choose to be better too. Part of the trouble is homelessness isn't sexy. It's not a vote winner because, by definition, the homeless don't have a vote. There's no homeless pride march stretching through the city streets on a sunny summer afternoon. If we don't notice the damage being done to 1/6 of our population, how will we notice when it's fixed? We'll notice because the charities who support the homeless will be closing their doors. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing?